out and born.
Right now, we are bound for America's heartland. Known as the deadliest two-gun marshal on the western frontier, Wild Bill Hickok once called Abilene, Kansas home, as did Dwight D. Eisenhower. And it's where we've stopped for the 2014 Kansas Barnfest.
Like that.
For the next 2 days, barn aficionados will soak up the rich frontier culture of Abilene while learning about barn preservation and touring historic farmsteads that are part of the tradition and lore of Dickinson County. The annual event is the brainchild of the Kansas Barn Alliance, bringing together barn owners and barn lovers from around the state.
And we move the Barn Fest around every year to a different part of the state. Well, for the first couple Barn Fests, we'd get together and we'd have educational stuff, preservation, those kinds of things, which was interesting. But finally, we realized one of the things that people like to do most is tour barns.
That's a cider press.
So when we expanded it to 2 days, and the second day being a day of touring barns, man, the numbers really grew.
In here, there's trap doors, so be careful where you walk.
The first day of Barnfest features experts in the kind of things country people want to know. Like, is that old barn really as historic as you say it is?
Oftentimes when we find buildings, no one ever wants to just outright lie to you. But you know, someone say, my grandfather built this barn in 1874, and he's not trying to lie to you. But barns and fish, same thing. Every time you tell a fish story, it gets bigger and bigger. Barns get 10 years older every time you talk about them.
Dr. Darren Rubino teaches and conducts research at Hanover College in Indiana. His specialty is dendrochronology.
Dendro tree chronotime logo study. So we're looking at how trees grow over time. And folks use tree rings to answer all sorts of questions, so there's a lot of different subfields. What we're interested in today is something called dendroarchaeology. Well, I go to old buildings and I remove samples from the timbers, and I use the tree ring patterns in those timbers to figure out when the building was built.
So I hear you've dated a lot of barns.
Yes, more barns than women.
All right.
Every one of those tree rings is a different size. And that's important. This is annual variability. These all appear to be cottonwood. I've taken a few slivers. Barns are an excellent place to do this because there are so many timbers from a lot of the trees that were growing right there on location. We take a piece about the size of a matchstick.
Okay.
And then do some microscopic analysis to be 100% sure.
Tell us a little bit about your Let's Get Started grant program.
The idea was that once we had the endowment, that we could offer Let's Get Started grants, which would allow a person who's knowledgeable to come in, evaluate the barn, give the barn owner an idea of what needed to be done first, how much it might cost.
I'm real passionate about saving this barn. The biggest thing that we want to do is we want to restore the hayloft. They used to have, back in the day, this was referred to as Papa's Corner, and they used to have dances in the barn.
Resurrect the dances.
Yes, yes, exactly.
Our first stop, Prospect Park Farm with Dale and Sonia Anders. Let's take a look. This impressive barn was erected in the 1870s by John Hiram Taylor, the son of a wealthy Cincinnati merchant. Built with native limestone, the farmstead is listed on the National Historic Registry in Dickinson County. It was a century-owned farm when the Anders family bought it 20 years ago from Taylor's youngest son, Paul. So Dale, tell us where we're standing right now.
We're standing on the second floor of 1878 barn. This would be considered the grain barn. Wagons would have come here on the second floor, dumped grain into the bottom pit. It would have been elevated to the top, and then the grain would have then dispersed to all four corners of the barn.
All the historic farming equipment was sold with the barn and is on display.
Everything's original here. We haven't brought anything to this area, including the cider press here. It was stored up on the third floor, and it does turn.
It does? Oh,
Yeah.
There's a little elbow
It is
grease.
a little elbow grease, but
While most folks were fascinated with the antique tools, Professor Rubino had a different focus.
Boards, you can see the saw marks. These are probably all cottonwood, but this peg right here It's probably a draw peg. This is definitely an oak peg, so this could take all the pressure as they would pound down to try and join this piece. I was asked to come so that I could sort of tell people who own barns that this is an option for them. They can, if things work out for them, figure out when their barn was actually built. And it's also just to share just how the science is done and to show them other barns from other areas and how they date, maybe even compare to their own structures. We're gonna take this back to the lab to get some identification for you.
Stop number 2, Harlan and Peggy Yonke's dairy barn. Harlan Yonke was just a boy when his father built this massive stone barn in the early 1940s. It was big enough to milk 20 cows at once with the help of a newly acquired milking machine.
Every cow knew her own stanchion. You could open the door and they'd all come right in here. And
Sitting in that old barn, the years seemed to fall away. I could almost hear Harlan's dad calling the cows in, smell the sweet milk and fresh cut hay.
You can walk in a barn that's abandoned that you don't even know the history. It doesn't take long to speak back. And when you travel just to see old barns, you pick up stories. And an old farmer said, if this barn could talk, it would have an accent. And when I go in a barn, you get that just flood of emotion coming back. These barns do speak to you.
Next week, we'll bring you 2 more barns from the 2014 Kansas Barnfest.